Hi, my name is Lamia, and this is my story.
Hello, guys. Welcome to part 3 of Hope and Hell, a series chronicling the events of my former coworkers and I at the former nonprofit that we used to work at. Today we have Lamia Makadam. How are you doing? What's going on?
I'm doing all right. We're here
Yeah.
and we're getting it out. And
So I wanna list out some of your accomplishments and some of the work that you do out here. Lamia Makadam is a Central Florida community activist who's been doing HIV harm reduction work for about 5 years. You started the first degendered clothing closet in Central Florida. You worked as a former outreach manager for the LGBT plus center in Orlando. You sit on Contigo Fund's Emergency Trans Care Fund Committee. You are an organizer with Central Florida Mutual Aid and their Trans Safety Fund. You sit on the board for Blue Trunk Community Network, and you also sit on the board for Abrigado Corazon. And you're a co-founder of Central Florida Queers for Palestine. You got a lot going on, honey.
yeah, we're
Like
busy.
you do a lot. So tell me about your work, and how does it feel to now be in a position where you are going through some of the things that you went through at this organization.
It is a massive relief to be out of there.
Yeah.
And very exciting to be able to move forward, because I feel like a lot of the work that I was doing had to be put on pause from the amount of emotional labor that went into Hope and Hell.
Yeah.
But it's really just like shocking how little things are shocking me, like going into a workplace and not having a camera installed above my seat. And
Yeah.
it's been good after the fact.
But outside of Hope and Help, you enjoy the work that you do. You enjoy the activism that you
Yes.
partake in and serving the community. I mean, it's very clear given the extensive resume, I can call it.
Yeah, it is absolutely like heart and soul. Yeah, there really there's nothing outside of that. The community work continues regardless.
Yeah. So I want to jump right in. Tell me what your first month on the job was like, and the things that you had to deal with. I don't know if it was the first month or the first 2 months, but
Yeah.
just give me an idea of the first time you realized there was a culture problem at the organization.
So I had seen the job listing online, and being in the community, I had already worked with Aisha Wilson, the person who formerly held the position I was applying for, which is harm reduction coordinator. I had heard some things about Hope and Help, but a lot of folks just seemed very timid, didn't really want to talk, explain things to the extent of what was happening. And so for me at that time, I was like, okay, I guess, all of these organizations have something going on. This is just another one. And the role was extremely important to me. Courtney Peters was one of the first people to establish a social service program in Orange County. And I used to be a part of Dream Defenders in 2020, and she was the regional director at the time, and so that's how I knew her. And once I got my position at the center as outreach and I wanted to start harm reduction there, she invited me over to check out the Certain Service program. And I actually became the 64th participant in the program from Courtney at that time. So when that job was available, it was something that I had dreamed of being able to go into and to do for quite some time, and felt very personally connected to it. So I jumped at the opportunity. My role at the center was incredibly important to me. The work that I was doing there, it was sure I called you crying, toward the end about how difficult it was for me to be able to make that move.
Yeah.
But I was so passionate about going into this certain service program that, I wanted to go for it. And so the first thing I did was I called Aisha Wilson. And I said, hey, I saw this position is open. Do you think if I applied, I would be qualified for it? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. I was like, should I be worried about anything? And it kind of seemed like she was a little bit hesitant to say anything as well. But she was like, they definitely have their issues.
Yeah.
Good luck. So I was like, okay. I was like, something's going on, but I'm not getting much information.
Yeah.
So I went ahead to start going through the interview process, and I think at the time, these sort of instances didn't seem like a lot to me. But in hindsight, I'm recognizing the plethora of red flags. But I go in, and my first interview is with Wes Golan, the HR manager.
Okay.
It was an incredibly unprofessional experience. He would text me just in a manner that was incredibly unprofessional, especially for somebody who holds his role. He asked me about like drug testing because he said that Hope and Help drug tests into the program, and he said, "But don't even worry about it." Like, well, I don't believe in drug testing. It was just an odd interaction.
Okay.
And then
So drug testing wasn't required?
he made it sound like it was required. However, he was going to give me an exemption. Not that I had expressed any reason to not take it.
Got it.
And he also mentioned that there would be a background check. And so I disclosed that I had an arrest in 2021 at a protest.
Okay, for your activism.
Yes.
Got it.
This was in support of Black and transgender employees at Foxtail Coffee. And he texts me about it, and he says, "Your arrest is a badge of honor."
Okay.
And so from that, I'm like, okay. I perceived it as, okay, this person is understanding that I am coming in to facilitate a drug program, a program for people who use drugs, and then it's probably inappropriate to be testing the people facilitating that. And also that the legality and morality are two separate things. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I took that well. Yeah. Not realizing he's just somebody who plays both sides. So those were my conversations with him. I was like, okay, here's this guy. I then had interviews with Amanda. That went great. Amanda was just straight to the point. She said, hey, we have like a few issues, but nothing we can't get past. This is the role, this is the job, this is what we're able to offer you. And basically the ability to bring on my own team, which was something that was really important to me. So that happened. The final interview I had was with Lisa Barr and Cheryl Provincial, two older white women. And I just remember in that meeting, and they're talking, about my pronouns. And then they start talking about how the older folks and, how they're like older, and so it's like really difficult for them with these pronouns and things of that nature, but that they are happy to have me. And what I really got from that was we are going to use our age to absolve us of any transphobia and not wanting to grow and learn and gender people properly or learn their name properly. And I really felt like I was just a very palatable trans person to them because it's not evident. And so that is something that they wanted. So I went through that process. I was like, okay, another old white nonprofit executive. Cool. I start the job, and my training is being done by Maria Monaco.
Uh-huh.
A beautiful person. However, she was an intern. She was incredibly knowledgeable. She taught me everything that she knew. She developed programs and different databases to be able to have different methods of tracking and just anything she could possibly do to make the job simpler. Mm-hmm. But it was not lost on me that I was being trained by a part-time intern. And the swiftness in which Aisha probably had to leave. And how poorly supported the program was. But at this point, I hadn't had many interactions with upper management.
Yeah.
So there was that. I had the ability to hire on my own team, and this is, I was so excited for it, but now it's a massive regret that, I was able to bring on people that I really care about and that I know are incredibly passionate about the work. The team that we built with the three of us, in as much modesty as I can say this, is the best Orlando has seen and will see. We had a team that cared about the community in ways that the nonprofit world could not understand, and would carry out their tasks and their jobs in just ways that are unfathomable to people specifically, such as Lisa Barr, Morgan Manry, Cheryl, Norm, all of them. And so we had our team, and we had a great team, and we started developing things. And one of the very first things when I got there is that they were trying to restart a program for trans folks. Previously, they had started a program that really did not sit well with the community. And so I came in, and at that time, a separate employee, Cody, was supposed to be starting it up. I ended up writing a 12-month proposal for the program with budgeting, things like that, activities. I sent it to finance, and it was approved. And so that's where Beyond Binary, a trans support program, was started at Hope and Help. It would happen once a month. There was almost an immediate sense of regret within that first month and leading up to the all hands meeting, having done that, because there were certain things that I was seeing around the office that just necessitated having some sort of change or some sort of level of education into the organization. So I would notice things like our paperwork was incompetent to be given to trans folks. It did not honor their name properly, their gender. The systems that we used would call them and leave messages, dead naming them. Case management said that they do not have a way to circumvent any of these because they go through Ryan White. However, none of them would advocate with Ryan White to potentially change that or make it more inclusive.
Yeah.
Just a plethora of excuses. But what I did end up being able to get from them is at the all hands meeting in August is they allowed myself and to bring in a facilitator to do a presentation on pronouns. Basic baseline level pronouns. And so I contacted a friend of mine who identifies as non-binary and is a trans leader in the community. And I was like, hey, will you come and facilitate this for everybody? And they said yes. They created an entire presentation for Hope and Help. They tailored the presentation to Hope and Help. I had given them the different paperwork that people have to go through hiring for patients. And they went through and they revamped the paperwork for Hope and Help to be able to become more inclusive. And within that presentation, I had a role as well as a co-facilitator where I would go and address the folks at Hope and Help in specifically and the things that I had experienced in my 1 month there.
Yeah.
So we go into this meeting that was initially a 30-minute presentation that turned into a 2-hour just tirade of transphobia.
So for context, you were facilitating this meeting for your job,
yes,
for the organization you were hired at to, be more inclusive of trans folk, because it is an LGBTQIA plus organization.
Yes, it is.
And this 30-minute meeting where you're supposed to be fostering a safe space for trans inclusion,
yes,
ends up spiraling into a 2-hour debate of
yes,
people, getting in their feelings, taking, personal jabs at one another, and it's just mess, chaos.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Yeah. This is also an organization that offers hormone replacement therapy. And at a time where violent anti-trans laws are coming in from Ron DeSantis, we need spaces to offer resources, and we need them to do so safely.
Yeah.
And so this all hands meeting, I think there were at that time about 70 plus employees. and it was required for people. So people drove in from out of town because there's some folks that work on the other side of the state. They drove in from out of town to attend this meeting. There were some things that I had seen leading up to this meeting that I wanted to address. And so the primary facilitator, and it was Wes Golan who was up, pressing his little buttons on the computer. They went up and they started their presentation, explaining what pronouns are. This is how to use them. So simple. And prior to this, to beginning that, we let everybody know that it was voluntary to be there.
Okay.
So nobody was required to sit through that. It comes to my part, and I just start letting them know some things that I had seen around the office, because there was an air of, there are no issues here. Everything is fine.
A culture of like sweeping things under the rug.
Very much so.
Got it.
So I was just mentioning a few minor couple of things. I was mentioning the paperwork and how we were working toward making it better. I was talking about how Anita Nunez actually right before the meeting walked out of the bathroom that said no urinals, and Julia was standing outside of the bathroom and snickers at her. I remember somebody giving people a tour of Hope and Help, and in a normal tone, volume of voice, they get to the bathroom and they start whispering to them why we have gender-neutral bathrooms. Just a variety of situations. Another non-binary coworker consistently being misgendered. And at that time, since we had begun Beyond Binary, we had a group chat of the trans staff members. And in that group chat, they were sending me things that they wanted me to go up and talk about. Or they would be able to have the mic and they can go ahead and share it themselves. The meeting and the comments made were so transphobic that they did not want to speak anymore. They did not want to speak on their experiences. They did not want them voiced. They were afraid. It eventually became almost a back and forth where people felt very defensive and took it very personally what was being said. A lot of I statements. So, Norm Gentry, for example, was saying that he would call people by what they looked like. And so if you don't look like a man to him, then you're just not a man. There were a significant amount of other comments made. There was back and forth between my supervisor, Amanda, and the patient assistance program manager, Morgan Manry. I honestly don't even remember the specifics of the comments in that moment. I was just so tense. My mind was just like going blank, spinning. But I do recall Morgan just sitting in all of his arrogance, like leaning back. And if you all see this man, this is a 6-foot-something tall, white, Southern man who very much so uses the projection of his voice and the size of his body to be intimidating. So he is spread out, leaned back, arms out, and in a very loud voice, making incredibly disrespectful comments and a joke of what was happening. And when our coworkers stood up to defend us, they were perceived as a threat. At one point, my boss, Amanda, removed her jeans jacket, and we later find out that they were trying to accuse her of having done that to try to fight them. And this is from entirely across the room. There was no way. So many points throughout it, anytime that I would try to educate anybody or talk about how trans folks were experiencing things in those moments and why these things are important, they would be getting mad at me to the point where Julia, the same person who snickered at Anita coming out of the bathroom, told me that I was being aggressive. At that time, I had gotten a text message saying that there was a participant in the lobby. And so I stepped out of the room to go help the participant. and left the primary facilitator to continue the conversation. People in the room assumed that I left because it had gotten heated. However, that is not the case. There was a participant they needed to be taken care of. So I went out there. I took care of the participant, and when I was walking back, Julia actually left the room behind me. Multiple people left the room and were sitting in the kitchen. And when I'm walking back, Julia stops me in one of the hallways where we were entirely alone. Not to apologize to me, but I can't even remember the specifics, but basically to try to say that she's not transphobic and that she would not have meant any of that. And then asks if she can hug me. And we hugged, and damn, that was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then from there, this meeting eventually ended with Lisa. I mean, actually, throughout it, Wes Golan was sitting behind me and speaking over me and my experiences. And anytime I would try to have a teaching moment, relentlessly, to the point where I turned around and I told him to stop speaking over me, which was then later used as me being aggressive toward Wes.
And this was a meeting, obviously.
This was
needed you to facilitate. They asked you to facilitate, and now they're using
my
it as a
name is
platform.
on that presentation.
They're now using it as an opportunity to like further silence and marginalize you and say that you were being aggressive.
Yep. And mind you, that presentation had been sent to them prior to it being presented. So they had every opportunity to look through it and say and do concerns. Whatever they needed to. And so throughout this, now we're nearing the end, and Wes and Lisa just want to smooth everything over, saying, okay, you know, this was very tense. Like, we're a family. You know, we're not transphobic. And then I think Lisa addressed my co-facilitator about 4 times, and not once did she gender them correctly. It's not even just that she misgendered them 4 times. It's that not once did she gender them correctly.
So in a meeting for trans inclusion and the proper gendering of employees within the workspace, the executive director for that organization is misgendering the facilitator that they sought out to hold the space.
Yes.
That's not funny. I think it's just quite ridiculous. It's quite outrageous. And it further highlights and underscores just the negligence of leadership. Like, this is something the organization should have been prepared for.
Yeah.
And they weren't.
Absolutely not. And so I can only imagine what the patients are experiencing.
Wow. So I want to move on to the incident that took place November 9th. You were arrested at a pro-Palestine protest. Subsequently, after you came into work, you were issued a final written warning. Tell us about that. Tell us about what you were met with when you came into work, what the conversation was with HR.
Yeah. So the arrest happened on Thursday. On earlier that week, the team and I had been in Miami at the Florida Harm Reduction Collective, so we came back Wednesday evening. I had taken PTO for Thursday.
Okay.
There was this action being planned to target one of the weapons manufacturers here in Orlando. I attended the action. I was body slammed 15 feet away by 5 grown male cops and charged with non-violent resisting arrest.
And again, this is off the clock. You're not in work uniform.
Off the clock.
You took, paid time off for this day, this action. So
Yes.
It had nothing to do with work.
It had no affiliation to Hope and Help. Their name was not so much as whispered. I get bailed out that night. Probably about 2 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
I still come into my shift on Friday morning. So I did not miss a single second of work. From the force used at the arrest, I could not walk with a shoe on for 3 weeks. And so I would have to have a sandal on one foot and my shoe on the other foot when I would come to work.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to this, HR would always have some sort of banter with me on a daily basis. After I get arrested and I'm at work, they won't so much as make eye contact with me. In fact, they're just staring at my foot. They know what happened, and I know that they know what happened because they're surveilling my Instagram.
They're surveilling your Instagram.
So Lisa Barr is watching my stories.
The executive director.
The executive director. And liking my posts.
Wow.
So I come into work the next day. They're acting weird, but they're not saying anything. And it was just... If they were surveilling my Instagram, it means that they saw the video of me being body slammed by 5 grown men. And now they're seeing my foot. They're seeing the pain that I'm in, that I'm walking around limping, that I have a wound on the back of my foot. Not one comment of concern. More of a look of disgust. I think Cheryl Provincial was the one staring at me the hardest and the most. And I don't think we mention her name a lot because she stays in the background. However, this woman's hand moves a lot of the things that cause harm in that organization, including anything that has to do with the servers, the security cameras, things of that nature. So I'd say about a week or so later, and I'm just waiting for something to happen. Mm-hmm. I'm not expecting anything to happen, honestly. Like I'm waiting for something, but I'm not expecting a write-up because I am aware that 2 of my other coworkers had also been arrested, and one in within a couple months prior to me. So Lisa Barr, I guess, took extreme issue with it. So a week or so later, I come into work, I pull in, and I'm in the back parking lot, and Amanda, my supervisor, comes out, and she comes out to my car, and she's like, "Hey, don't come in yet. I have something to tell you, but they can't know that I'm talking to you. So I'm going to go inside, and I'm going to call you. Stay in the car so you can take the phone call." She calls me, and she tells me that they had written me up for a final reminder. I didn't have a first warning or a second warning, just a final reminder write-up prior to termination.
You had no prior instances of misconduct, disciplinary action, written warnings?
Not even a tardy.
Wow.
Nothing. I just had to prepare myself. I was like...
So, no, just again.
Yes.
No prior instances of misconduct.
No.
No former, disciplinary actions, final written warnings issued to you. And their reason for issuing you a final written reminder in this instance is because...
My political activism, something. So Amanda lets me know we're going into Wes's office. So she heads in and I follow and I sit down. And he hands me the final reminder write-up. Amanda refused to sign it because it is illegal and unethical.
What's illegal and unethical? The language contained
in
the
language contained in this write-up. So I was written up, and the things that they would cite is that I basically was connected to Hope and Help. Even though at this action, there's absolutely nothing tying me back. I had previously done an interview for Hope and Help with I believe it was West 2 News, okay, about the state of trans care in Florida. And I platformed Hope and Help in that. And so because of that, I am in the news media. as an employee of Hope and Help for that interview. However, it has no ties
to the political action. Your activism outside of the workplace.
Correct. And so in this, there are a lot of falsities. They say that I had done an interview that day at the Orange County Courthouse. I was not at the Orange County Courthouse. I was in jail. I did no interviews that day. They said I was protesting at the Orange County Courthouse. That was also incorrect. It was at an arms manufacturer. Just a lot of made-up information in there in the first place. And they were very much so pinning it on political affiliation. However, they have a picture of Ron DeSantis on their website. So I'm not understanding how they could cite that when they themselves are affiliated, when they themselves also had people like Anna Eskamani come in and speak at their events.
So they've never had an issue being politically affiliated with any candidates or any person.
In fact, back in July, my arrest was a badge of honor. So is the switch up that they're anti-Arab and racist? Yes. Within that write-up, there is language specifically attacking my kufiyya. And they decide to write up a dress code that specifically applies to just me, stating that I cannot wear any sort of Arab or cultural garb.
All right. Give me a second now. So you mean to tell me, post you finding out that the executive director at your organization was surveilling your social media accounts, within the span of a week, you come back into work and they issue you a final written warning despite no prior instances of misconduct, disciplinary actions, and they tell you they do not support your political affiliations or activism off the clock, outside the workplace, and in addition, they tell you you cannot wear your cultural, your ethnic garment, the kufiyya.
Correct. And that was not the first time that they singled me out for my cultural background.
And the director who oversees your program, if I get this correct, would not sign on to the written warning.
Yes. Amanda Cruz refused. She refused to sign on to that warning. She told them that it was entirely unreasonable. And she stood her ground for me.
Wow. So it is my understanding that your coworkers wrote a letter to the board. Co-worker. What was the board's response?
So the board said initially that they would investigate it. The person investigating it, I believe, was JP, John Palisamo, or he was one of the people.
Jim Palmisano.
Yes.
Got it.
Responding. And I just want to make note that this man his last name Palisamo is also owner, operator, executive, something of an IT server.
I think the chief operating officer, the
yes.
COO. Okay.
We also have a door in the Hope and Help building that says the Palisamo room. So this board member also makes money off of the organization because we use his server. And on top of that, Cheryl Provincial, the executive deputy director, is his aunt. So he is the one handling this case.
So the chief operating officer, the COO for the IT company that runs the organization servers, is the nephew of the chief deputy
Correct.
director, the executive director's second-hand man.
Yes.
And he's the one presiding over this discrimination complaint
yes.
that was brought up by staff members.
Yep. And it's going to be important to note that he runs those, his company runs those servers in a moment.
Wow. Okay. So what came about of the response, the board's investigation, quote unquote?
Yeah. So Eric wrote a beautiful letter, outlined it for them, told them what was going on, and didn't just stop at what was happening with me. He addressed other issues as well. Yeah. They responded back saying that they had done their investigation, found no wrongdoing, and found that the actions of Wes Golan and Lisa Barr were in alignment of the organization's values. However, at no point during this investigation was I spoken to. So already null and negligent.
So they were they were investigating complaints that we brought forth regarding discrimination that took place against you.
Yes.
And not at any point during this investigation did they speak to you.
Correctly. Correct. Except at one point there was an event that we were able to see him, and we went up to him and established ourselves as, hey, what are the updates?
Because that was our first time meeting.
That was our first time meeting
the board member, Jim Palmisano.
Yep, and he said they're getting to it.
Wow. Okay. You would later retain a lawyer.
Yes.
Post these events. What had conversations been like with leadership? What was their response to these claims that you were bringing forth about this being unfair? Like, you're being told you cannot wear your cultural ethnic garment. You're being written up, issued a final written warning, again, despite no prior instances of misconduct. What were the conversations like with HR, with the executive director, when you were airing out these grievances about discrimination?
Just a lot of denial, or they would pretend to be concerned.
Okay.
And just further be discriminatory and racist, because in that meeting with Wes Golan, when they did hand me that, I was not silent on how discriminatory it was. I was not silent on how I can't wear my ethnic garb, but everybody else can, and how I was the only one it was being issued to, and how they were selective about which political activism is okay for them and what is not. And, you know, we had, you know, Wes Golan thought he would be great to start the DEI group. But through that, I saw the company's demographics and learned that I was the only Arab there. And at one of the Beyond Binary meetings, somebody had left, one of the group members had used the restroom and I guess written on some paper, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," and signed it "A Friend of Palestine," and left it in the bathroom. The following morning, Cheryl Provencal walked in and saw it. And the next thing I know, I'm being called into HR again to be told about it, almost as though I was being blamed for it. And they're like, "Oh, you know, there's nothing wrong. We just want you to be aware." However, I am one of 4 facilitators for that group, and only the Arab was called into the office. And so they just responded with further discrimination. After I got legal counsel involved, my attorney sent them a letter stating all of the ways I had been discriminated against. The following day, they send out an arbitrary agreement.
Yes, a mutual arbitration agreement.
And this would make employees sign their rights away to being able to take legal action against Hope and Help. And the language that they used in this document was not accessible. And so upon us seeing this, we informed our coworkers that by signing this, they would be signing their rights away. We worked to organize a few folks to send them back an email asking them if they could please explain what exactly that meant in plain terms.
Yes.
And also if we can seek legal advice prior to signing it, and if our employment would be dependent on our signature. And then shortly later, we get an email from Lisa saying that it was sent out by accident once they realized that people knew what they were doing. And they really tried to trick me and push me into signing that the day after they received this letter from my attorney.
Were there any moments where you had direct conversation with the director, the executive director, where she shared her opinions on your ethnic garment, or she offered up her perspective for why, or her justifications
Yeah.
for why she told you not to wear the ethnic garment, or why it was
She,
told that you could not wear the keffiyeh.
yeah, she absolutely did. And I think it was already exemplified in the group chat. There's a group chat called The Amazing Family of Hope and Help. And shortly after October 7th, Norm Gentry posts in the chat the flag of Israel, the genocidal flag of Israel. And Lisa Barr, Cheryl Provincial, and Wes Golan all heart that flag and that message from Norm Gentry. So they have already explicitly shown support for the settler state of Israel. So that to me was already a very clear sign from her of being a genocide supporter. After that, I had been pulled into her office. Again, I'm forgetting the moment. I have my final reminder. Okay. Sorry. So after my lawyer had kind of gone back and forth with their attorney, their solution to try to cover their asses was to reissue me this final reminder write-up. So they changed the language so that it would exclude the portion where they targeted my keffiyeh and told me that I could not wear Arab garb. Because that was clearly discriminatory and very clearly illegal. However, Lisa Barr is so racist, she can't even help it. And so she starts talking about my keffiyeh, saying, you know, whatever it's called, she doesn't know what it's called. And she says to me, and I ask her, I was trying to understand where this hatred was coming from, what the big deal was over a keffiyeh. And she tells me it's because people could feel unsafe. I think I called out what had happened. I called out that they had removed that specific portion because they knew that it was discriminatory. And
Okay, so in that write-up that they issued you, they ended up removing
That
the
was the
stipulation that you could not wear the keffiyeh?
yes.
Okay. And then following that removal, what was the conversation?
So the conversation was that they had removed that because they knew that it was illegal. And she's like, no, that it was a matter of safety. And I said, Lisa, have I made anyone feel unsafe? And she's like, no, it's not that. It's just your keffiyeh could make people coming in feel unsafe. And so I said, Lisa, that was incredibly discriminatory. And she goes, no, it wasn't. And I believe because I had legal representation, they were afraid to, say too much more.
Yeah.
However, this woman is so racist that even when they excluded it from the writing, she still couldn't keep herself from letting it out of her mouth. And I asked if me signing that document is me agreeing to it or just acknowledging that I received it. They said it's just acknowledging that I received it. So I grabbed the pen, I signed it, and I walked out the room.
Wow. So post that conversation, post all these events happening, I want to know, did things change for you within the organization? Right? You're overseeing the syringe exchange department. You're overseeing a team of 2 people, a health educator, a linkage coordinator. We had a volunteer program going on. Did you at any point feel like there were changes being made that impeded your ability to carry out your roles and your responsibilities?
Yes. When I was being hired on, I was promised a plethora of resources.
Okay.
I was promised a build out for the certain service program in a separate area.
Okay.
I was promised a mobile unit for our team to be able to go out into the community. I was promised a raise and a promotion in December, which is the only reason why I accepted a lesser title than I had previously. After all of this, I was denied my promotion. I was denied my raise, even though the director of the financial department had already backed up the fact that there was something that they could afford, and that the numbers of the program proved that it was well deserved. It affected the way that we were able to treat participants, because we couldn't, with the amount of discrimination going around with people such as Morgan Manry, in just so many ways. I'm sure you all will hear about the way Morgan Manry told Eric and Anita that to go find their master and things like that. But after that conversation, he pulled me into his office to tell me that he's not racist, he never has been, and that he has no intention of changing, and that if HR knew, he'd get in, that he would get in trouble. And so it impeded my ability to work in so many ways, because there were so many people that became barriers. When Morgan Manry is the only person that you have to go through to be able to take care of your participants, and you know that he treats them like dirt and will intentionally kick them out of programs and do so with glee, and ensure that their hepatitis C cannot be treated, it really affects the way that you can do the work, because how am I supposed to get this person into care when the person I know I have to go through is going to cause more harm? So we would circumvent those things. Anita Nunez started finding insurance for folks outside of Hope and Help so that they can get that and still be treated without having to go through him. This impeded me in ways such as I was being excluded from leadership meetings. I was being excluded from emails, even when my own staff would be emailing the board of directors, and when they would respond, they would take me out of the response. At one point, it got to a point where I did not know how to be able to manage the team anymore, because we have a job to do and we have participants to serve. But this organization is taking and draining so much out of us that we're able to spend a lesser percentage with participants than we are in the organization. And for me, in a supervisory role, how am I supposed to uphold these systems and these standards of people toward my team that are entirely unethical? And so it kind of came to a point where I can see my team is exhausted. I can see my team is just like, I know every time Sam, the maintenance man's keys jingle, and I see Anita tense up.
Yeah.
And I think, like, seeing you when we would do outreach and we would be in the van, because I stopped recognizing the Eric that I knew when we were in those buildings. And it was when we would go on outreach and we'd be in the van, and it was just our team. And the way, like, the joy came back and the motivation came back. And you and Anita would be singing and dancing and just laughing and serving people and doing the work and making an impact. And then we go back to the office, and I just see, like, the life, like, drain. And so for months there was, and still is, an incredible amount of guilt for having taken people I respect and love and admire at this point almost more than anybody else. And we had this joke that our job was to show up and be abused. But for me and in my head, my job was bringing these people that I love and care about into the workplace to be abused. So it definitely affected the way that I was able to be a leader within the organization. And I feel like I didn't know how to handle that. And I feel like in a lot of ways I didn't provide my team with maybe the structural support to carry on and do the program because I didn't want to add anything else. But in hindsight, maybe some level of structure, at least in that, would have been a sense of comfort. But we're here now.
And we'll address this once we get off. We have about 4 minutes left, so I'm going to breeze through everything. You shared with me around the time you put in a request for short-term disability.
Yes.
You would be fired before you could even get to the short-term disability. Ultimately, what do you feel like the reasons were behind your termination? And
yeah, so the Friday prior to is when Ryan Lao-Chan, I don't know this man's last name, the new guy that came in and took over the director of operations position, he came in acting like he was on our side, but very, very clearly a pawn of these white supremacists. And the way that they came into the room and tried to get you to go into HR with them and isolate you again, because the first time that they wrote you up, they waited for me to be out of office.
Yeah.
And I was your direct supervisor. It was my responsibility to be there. It was my responsibility to advocate. And they took that away. And not just that, but they isolated you in a way that I find to be incredibly intentionally intimidating. And that is violent. And the way that they walked in that room that day, asking you to go with them, and I'm grateful that you did it. And you told them, you either let me record this, or we do it right here. And they said, we're not, or you let my supervisor come with me. They said no to all of the above, so it happened right there. Wes Golan, Ryan goes back, gets Wes Golan. They come into the room. They announce that you are terminated. And then they treat you like a violent criminal. They do not give you a moment to go gather your stuff. They block other employees from coming in to be able to say goodbye to you. They walk you out the door as though you're some kind of threat. And when you try to go in through the other door to say goodbye to your coworkers and go through the exit that is closest to your vehicle, I see Wes Golan body check you. I see that white man put his body up against you. And when I say something, everyone is standing there silent and watching. And when I say that that's not okay, Ryan hits back with, well, he was asked to leave. And I don't know in whose book that makes it okay to put your body on somebody else. And they walked you out, and everybody sat silent. And so Lisa Barr, Wes Golan, Morgan Manry, any one of y'all that was affiliated with that, fuck you. And to all of the white staff members that sat there and watched a black man and a trans woman and a trans Arab go through this, what a shame on your complacency.
Lamia, my final question to you is, what would you like to see happen with Hope and Help? What does justice look like for you?
Justice for me within Hope and Help, the organization needs to be shut down. There is evil living in those walls at this point. It is a space that nobody should have to enter again. It is a violent workspace. I want Hope and Help to be shut down as an organization. I want all grants and resources to be transferred to competent organizations. I want every single person who supported this and who aided in this to be held accountable. That means Lisa Barr needs to resign. Wes Golan needs to resign. Morgan Manry needs to resign. Norm Gentry needs to be looked into, including his positions within the community, as well as Cheryl Provincial and her conflicts of interest within the organization. Yeah. The entire board of directors needs to resign. And the entire community, the entire nonprofit community in Orlando needs to stand on business, because they are profiting off of our identities every time they write that grant and every time they get that grant money. And then they're sitting silent.
I'm on now.
And that's what justice would look like for me.
All right. Well, Lamia, you said a lot. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking and sharing your story. It's much appreciated. It's much valued. And I hope your circumstances, post everything happening at this organization, improve.